Hey, everybody, I'm Paul Wilke.
And I'm David Oro, and you're listening to The Embargoed, the greatest PR podcast of all time.
Damn straight. There's always something to talk about and a point to make.
We're going to do it when we want, whenever we want, which is usually about every other week.
Emphasis on every other week or when we want on the latter.
There you go.
Whether it's tech, business, sports, music, or your mama, we're going to cover it.
And it all comes from the view of public relations, reputation, and communications.
We're all about punching stodgy PR in the face.
That's right. So sit back, strap in, and let's get it on. Okay, Paul, today's Thursday, August 10th. It's my first morning recording of The Embargoed. We usually do this in the afternoon. It's like 9:30 now. And for some reason, I slept in today. So I'm like, what? I got to do a recording, and I better get some coffee going. So
I got up early.
Fired up for today, though. I'm so fired up for today.
I got up early to download new versions of Zooms on all the computers we're recording on, and wade through all my email, read all the newsletters. But yeah, it's still the middle of summer, man. It's still got that summer vibe.
Yeah, I know, because last night I had like 3 beers on a Wednesday night hanging out at a community event. And I was like, oh, yeah.
That explains it.
Celebrated. So, Paul, all good with you? We've got a guest today. As usual, we're making this a regular thing because we can't talk to each other.
We need a chaperone. We've got a fantastic chaperone today. Jimmy, I'm going to let you talk about yourself a little bit, but I'm pleased to introduce today Jimmy Boegle. He is editor and publisher of 2 publications, the Reno News and Review and the Coachella Valley Independent. And we're going to get a little into what caught my eye about you, Jimmy, and dive deep into that. But Jimmy, introduce yourself.
Well, I just first have to say, if I'm the chaperone for this group, we're in big, big trouble. My name is Jimmy Boegle. I am the editor and publisher of the Coachella Valley Independent in Palm Springs, California. It's a paper I started about 10 and a half years ago. And as of about a year and a half ago, I am the publisher and executive editor of the Reno News and Review in Reno, Nevada, my hometown former alternative news weekly, founded in 1993, that the former owners, when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, panicked, stopped everything, and slowly brought the paper back online. But since I took over about a year and a half ago, we've brought the paper back into print as a monthly and are doing pretty well.
So you are working in this sort of what they call alt-mags, right? Alternative newspapers, or
yeah, they used to be called alternative news weeklies, but that term's kind of going by the wayside for 2 reasons. First of all, a lot of us aren't actual weeklies anymore. We're online only. In the case of my 2 publications, we're monthly. And I'm actually the board president of the Association of Alternative News Weeklies right now. We're actually looking at changing our name because a lot of the newer startup publications don't identify with that alternative moniker. The other issue is that the alt-right has kind of taken over the word alternative. So the 3 of us who have been around for a while know what an alternative news weekly is, but a lot of the younger folk will say don't necessarily. So yes, that's what we are, but it may not be what we are in the future, if that makes any sense.
What name are you gravitating towards? What are the ideas?
Wait, I got an idea. No one's using zine anymore. You can take that one.
We'll pass. Thank you very much. We're looking at a lot of words like local and independent, pretty much like a lot of other journalism organizations are looking at. But I don't know for sure that we're changing our name. I think we probably are. But there's a committee of smarter people than I working on that right now to come up with a new name. And it'll probably have the words local or independent or something like that in it.
In terms of readership, what is it? What is the demographic that you guys kind of go at or looking for? Is it skew younger, middle, older?
If we were having this conversation 15, 20 years ago, I'd say that we tend to skew younger. We tend to skew a little bit more affluent than the daily newspapers. However, these days, in a lot of our communities, we are just as dominant in terms of the news and the coverage that we're doing as the daily newspapers. Like in Santa Barbara, for example, there is no more daily newspaper. It went online and then it died. Here in Reno, even though the News and Review went away for a while and came back, even though we were comparing a monthly versus a daily, we've got a larger circulation than the daily. In Palm Springs, the Desert Sun, the daily there, has been somewhat saved from a lot of big cuts because the newsroom unionized, and as a result, they can't make significant changes to the actual newsroom because they're in the process of a labor contract negotiation. So these days, our demographics are all over the map because depending on the city that we're in, we might be the dominant media source, where even traditionally we might have had a lot of younger, hipper readers theoretically. Now pretty much everyone is reading us, or not everyone, but everyone who's going to be reading a newspaper is reading us because we're the only ones left.
That's crazy. Well, it's nice that you mentioned that because, listen, I was the fan of the alternative newspaper. I was, in my 20s, I was in San Francisco, and it was the SF Weekly, and was it the Bay Guardian? I think it was what it was called. And I would just pick those up because it had a lot of entertainment news and then alternative news in terms of a different view of what the Chronicle and the Examiner was delivering at the time. What I'm finding now is that, and a lot of it was definitely an alternative view to things in life, right? And yes, how you approach city government and politics and businesses and the view of that world. Now what I'm finding with these publications like yours, these alternative ones are actually delivering news. And they still may have an opinion, and all of them are opinionated, but it's not even alternative. It's a great viewpoint. So there's a new publication, San Francisco, called the SF Standard, that is online. And it's great because hyper localized and really hitting some good things. And I think this is where these independent magazine publications can really make a difference. I live in Napa Valley. We have the Napa Valley Register. It's owned by Lee Enterprises. And like, there's a skeleton crew. I feel for the local reporters here, right? It's like maybe cover what's going on at the county and maybe some new policy that they're doing. But there's deeper things that are going on that they're not just totally missing. And this makes room for you guys. And from what I've seen, it's really filling a void in terms of coverage, and I hope it sticks around.
Me too. And you talk about San Francisco and the two large. The very first alternative news weekly journalism conference I went to was in January of 2000 in San Francisco, up on Van Ness at the Cathedral Hill Inn, or whatever it was called, Cathedral Hill Hotel, and it was hosted by the Bay Guardian and the SF Weekly, and they're both gone now. The Bay Guardian, Bruce Brugman retired about 10 years ago. And a lot of it continues on in a publication called 48 Hills that Tim Redmond, his managing editor, continued. Julie Mackinnon is running the SF Standard. She's actually the former editor in Palm Springs of the Desert Sun. And, they've got a lot of money behind them. And so even within the non-traditional media, or non-daily media, things are changing right now. It seems like in a lot of the bigger cities, the former alternative news weeklies kind of went down in flames, like the Bay Guardian and SF Weekly. Whereas in smaller places like Reno, like the Coachella Valley, we're still doing well. And in all of these places, a lot of online only publications are starting up and are doing great work. But the problem is you add up the number of reporters that the alternative publication, whatever you want to call it, the online startup has, and that's a fraction of the number of reporters that the dailies had 15, 20 years ago. So even though there's a lot of really great new publications doing awesome things, the number of reporters in all of our cities is significantly diminished compared to where we were, 15, 20 years ago. And that's kind of scary when it comes to what local governments are doing, what really cool arts organizations aren't getting covered. And so, it's a problem. And like I said, there's a lot of good journalists doing a lot of good things, but there aren't nearly as many of them as we need.
With both publications that you're operating, how are you adjusting? What are you doing differently than you maybe were doing 2 years ago?
2 years ago, not a lot new. But if you go back before the pandemic, pandemic, of course, changed every industry in some way, shape, or form. And for example, with the Independent, we were really, focused on our website and our print version. Whereas when the pandemic hit and all of a sudden, we never missed a print version, we had to cut our circulation back quite a bit and our page count quite a bit for a couple months there. But we actually really shifted towards newsletters. And so as a result, the Indie Digest, the thing that caused you to reach out to me originally, Paul, that became a bigger part of the Independent, because at the time we kind of stepped in to fill the void because there was so much misinformation. People were scared if you go back to where we were in March and April of 2020, and they didn't know what was open, what was closed, what the rules were, what an essential worker was, what all this news was about what was going on with health in various places. So the Indie Digest became a big part of what we do.
Jimmy, I was afraid to touch the grocery store conveyor belt, and I'm still afraid of that thing because I thought I was going to get some random COVID.
Yeah, well, do you remember when we were washing our groceries and leaving our mail out in the sun for a while, and all this crazy stuff that we now know was kind of ridiculous? But it was literally a scary time. With unless we've been around, going back to unless you're 100 years old and we're around for the flu in 1918 and 1921. None of us lived through this before. And it was such a scary time. And, I really think that in a lot of ways, it introduced a lot of readers to the Independent, because we were actually, giving the news in an interesting way, curating links to national news, but also doing it in a personal way, saying like, holy crap, I'm scared too. It's okay. We're going to get through this. And it really was transformative for the Independent. Here in Reno, it was transformative in a different way, because the former owners were very print focused and just kind of shut everything down. And so we've been in the process of really revitalizing the News and Review, both online and in print, because people missed it. And up here, I think a lot of people realized how valuable this little newspaper is to the community, because in a lot of their minds, even though it did continue online in a limited fashion, it basically disappeared from their lives for 2 years. And all of a sudden they got it back, even if though it was monthly compared to weekly, it was a big deal to them.
Well, I have to say, I thank you for doing such a great job with the Indie Digest. I moved down to Coachella Valley about a year and a half ago, and it's, latched onto it early and love it. And you do some great work. And what I wanted to get back to is what connected us was in your July 27th edition, and I quote, I'd like to discuss a less serious matter. PR people who bring out my curmudgeonly side. Now you're among good company, because we're both curmudgeonly when it comes to PR as well. What got your goat?
Well, Jimmy, before you even answer that, how can you not click on the headline on July 27, 2023 in the Indie Digest when it said, "Beware of music PR people, yoga pants, Ozempic, and ticks"? The hell? Click right through. Let's go.
we had a good open rate on that one. But yes, and that actually, basically what the Indie Digest is it's an introduction from me. It's a link to all the various stories, almost all local, that the Independent's done since our last newsletter. It's twice a week now. And then it's a curated list of links, local news blurbs, but a lot of it is national blurbs. And in that case, there was a piece about yoga pants, possibly like certain yoga pants have metal in them. So if you wore them to MRIs, you could actually get burned. There was, a tick-borne disease. And so actually all that stuff, it was just kind of a way to make a fun headline. But the music PR people thing, it was just so happened that my annoyance with PR people goes beyond music as
fair.
Well. Although, there's a lot of great PR people.
Thanks for being on the show, Jimmy. Thanks for being on the show with us.
Love you, mean it. No, and there truly are a lot of good PR people, but in this case, it just so happened within like a month or so, there were 3 incidents with music PR people that made me kind of wonder what in the hell was going on in the world. The first one was a very innocuous thing. It was actually for a story we did in Reno. And we published a story. And what we do is, at the end of every music preview or whatever, there's a box that has, when the concert is, how, the address of the venue, how much tickets are. And then you always put the ticket price that's on the venue website or the promoter website or wherever people are getting tickets. And it just so happened this website did it the right way, in my opinion. And they said the ticket price is, I don't know what it was, like $47.75, which meant it was like $40 plus $7.75 in fees. And we just put down that tickets were $47.75 because that was the first number you saw when you went to the ticket website. The music PR person said, "Can you change the ticket price? It's actually $40." And I basically said, "No, on your website or the person you're representing's website, it says $47.75. So no." The second one was there was a band playing at Acrisure Arena, and our amazing music writer in Coachella Valley, Matt King reached out and wanted to do an interview, and they said, well, the band isn't really doing interviews right now, but would love to have you out for a show or have you review their album. And we said, we really don't do that. We like to do interviews. We like to tell our readers what they can go see as opposed to what they missed. And that was fine. But then they emailed me, then they emailed Matt again, then someone else emailed Matt again. And literally we had about 5 or 6 emails from various people asking us to cover this band. But when we said, can we do an interview? No, the band isn't doing interviews at this time. And then the last one I think was the stupidest one is we published a piece for a band playing or a musician playing in the Coachella Valley this month. And we put a YouTube embed to a song, their biggest song that Matt and the artist had talked about in their story. And we got an email from the PR people. Can you swap that out for their newer song? Would really like it if you embedded this song instead, because they're really trying to promote it right now. And let's just say my email back to them was a lot kinder than I wanted it to be initially. There were no swear words in it, but I basically said, no, we'll stand by the story as it is, given that that's your biggest song. And it's the song they actually talked about in the story. Thank you.
One of the things that struck me about those examples is, we've been on the other side of those. And one of the things that I always tell journalists is, if you're getting a weird request from me, there are 3 others that I
Yes.
gatekept and kept from asking you. But that's not an excuse. I mean, there are reasonable requests that we can ask journalists, and there are unreasonable ones. I say so. I guess my first question is, what are some reasonable requests that PR people can make to you, either before an article's written or after a story's written?
Well, asking for coverage is very reasonable. In the case of the big band that was playing at the arena, I understand you've been tasked with getting coverage. For whatever reason, the band members aren't doing interviews because they don't want to, or they have maybe a diva complex, and you've got to ask. Where it got ridiculous in that case is that the left hand and the right hand and the third hand out there, none of them knew what was going on. And so as a result, we got multiple requests. But, if there's a correction, or you have a legitimate request, or even if you've got a client that is asking for something completely ridiculous, but you have to ask, that's one of the reasons why, on the can you swap in this different embed question, I didn't use a lot of swear words and ask them, what their problem was in the email. I just said, no, we're going to stand by it, because I realized that could be coming from a client that was being a little bit overly difficult. I've also had PR people come and say, or code their emails in a certain way saying, the client asked me to send along a request that you do this. I'm passing it along to you. Is it possible? Kind of coding it as a way of saying, I know this is batshit crazy, but I have to ask, but really when it comes to getting a story right and making the best story possible and working with a writer and an editor to make sure that the coverage that we're doing for our readers and that you're getting for your client is best, any question in that vein is appropriate and appreciated. But far too often, a lot of the questions aren't, because the thing that drives me crazy about a lot of PR people in any industry these days is a lack of follow-up. I've had 2 instances in the last 3 or 4 months where I spent hours and hours developing an advertising proposal. Being a small newspaper, I'm on both the advertising side and the editorial side, where the client wants to do this, they're looking at these months, what kind of rates can you get me, and then tweaking it. There's one, at least I probably spent 4 or 5 hours over the course of several weeks putting together. And they said, we're supposed to have an answer from the client by the 18th. And the 18th comes and I don't hear anything. So on the 20th, I sent an email saying, hey, following up. And they say, oh, well, the client hasn't let us know. We'll get back to you. And then I send 2 follow-up emails a week later, and then 3 weeks later, and I don't even get a response from them. And it's not just PR people, it's anyone in any agency. I'm sure that a lot of PR people have annoying stories from journalists doing similar things, but it's just a lack of regard for people's time, especially these days, when whether you're working at a PR agency or you're on your own, you have a small PR firm and you've got your own shingle up, or you're publishing a publication like I am, 2 publications in 2 cities with small staffs. Our time is valuable. Our time is limited, and we need to be respectful of everyone's time. And a lot of times people aren't doing that.
Jimmy, let me ask you this. So Coachella is what? Is it the largest festival in America, a music festival?
It's one of them. I think because it's over 2 weekends and you've got 125,000 people there. Yeah, it's if not the largest, it's one of the largest.
And then you got to cover it because they turned it into a country music festival after that, the week after.
Well, we don't cover it as much as you'd think because, speaking of annoying PR and media people, the folks at Coachella actually do not give local media other than the Daily, for the most part, weekend one passes.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Every year we get weekend two and we go and we don't, we do a preview. We preview a lot of the bands in medium and smaller sized fonts on there because it's a resource. People are going to want to know if they're going to the festival, be them local or, coming in from out of town, they're going to know about a lot of these bands that are playing in the earlier time slots at the festival that they may not have heard of. But then when it actually becomes to festival time, we aren't going there just because, the staff wants to go and have a fun festival experience. No, we're going there to work. And despite the fact that I can go back to our first year in 2013, showing that when we go there, we're covering, we're reviewing what's going on. We're finding interesting local stories that other people aren't telling. We still only get weekend two passes. And that drives me crazy.
What about this? What is the inquiries like from music PR people or from anybody really? Are you inundated by 100? There's got to be 50, 100 bands there? Is everyone reaching out to you all at the same time? Are you inundated?
It's not just Coachella. It's year round. I am on so many music media lists, and they are national lists, and they're sending me, this new band is coming out from a concert and they're going on a tour. And, you look at the tour and the closest they're coming to either of my markets is Albuquerque or something. And it's a lot of as a result, though, because we get so many of these emails, a lot of times if there's a really interesting band or musician coming to Palm Springs or coming to Reno, a lot of times I'll miss it because they're coming from the same people or the same emails or the same, labels, whoever it is, the same PR firm that are sending me all these other ones. And so I think, a lot of it is, there's that, it's just this blast of emails and it's lacking this personal attention where, a PR person's going, hey, this band is coming to your venue or it's coming to your city. They're playing at this venue and, we've got an interview slot. Would you like it? There's less of that going on. And unfortunately, if it's coming from the same person that's also spamming me about where every band is playing in the country forever, I might be missing that. So that's kind of the problem that we have there.
I mean, one of the things that I'm hearing, and Dave and I were talking about it beforehand, is your grumbles about PR people, music specific, are across the industry. We're hearing this from tech journalists as well. And I think the challenge, and again, I think it goes back to what you said earlier. We're all working towards the same goal of decent coverage, decent quality of stories, reaching the audience. I don't know how much of it's misunderstanding, how much of it is rookie PR mistakes or just sloppy work. But I think it's a combination of all three.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And can I give one other PR rant, especially as far as it goes locally?
You want to go off on some PR people? Go off. This is where to do it.
When it comes to especially local coverage and local PR agencies talking about your local media, I think that a lot of PR agencies are blind or tone deaf to the fact that the media sources that are giving them coverage, be them newspapers, online, TV, radio, you name it, are all struggling. And I think that the best PR people realize that when they are coming up with their proposals for their clients or whatever, it's best to actually bake in some advertising money for these media sources because they need support. There are several PR agencies both here and in Palm Springs where, for years they've asked us for coverage. We've given them coverage on a lot of things. And yet not once have any of their clients through them spent $1 in advertising with us, because they are going to their clients and they're saying, we can get you earned media and, pay us to do that. And we'll do that, even though the earned media is costing the Coachella Valley Independent, the Reno News and Review, insert name of radio station, insert name of online news source. The media sources that are actually giving reported good coverage that costs a lot of time and money to do. Yet when they're going to their clients, they're not saying, hey, you should probably throw a few bucks at them in terms of advertising, because if we don't support these media sources, they're going to die. And, I've had large multi-million-dollar people say, I'm sorry, we just don't have it in our budget to spend $249 for a 1/8 page ad for the month of our event. And it's like, yeah, you do. So that's the other thing, is that a lot of PR people, and I understand they're looking out for their own, they've got their own bills to pay, they've got their own mouths to feed or whatever, but far too few local PR agencies that are depending on their local media to get coverage aren't doing what they can to make sure those local media are also getting the funding that they need to continue giving good coverage to their clients.
I think that's a fair reminder, and I think one of the things that, and we've spent a lot of time talking about this in terms of 5 years ago, the wall between PR and advertising was a mile high, and some of the more nimble outfits that hopefully we are and that we work with recognize that paid and earned, that line is blurring. And, it makes sense to support smaller publications like yours and recognize that this is an ecosystem. It's not,
yes.
These are not islands. And, before, I think we saw our roles as islands, and now it's more complete ecosystems.
Absolutely. And, we don't determine our coverage based on who advertises with us.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't. And, but me being on the publisher side, I very rarely assign stories. I've got, my editor here in Reno assigns the stories, and I've got all of my various writers in the Coachella Valley. They're telling me what they're covering because they're the theater experts, they're the news experts, with rare exceptions, they're determining what they're covering. And that kind of insulates, keeps the editorial wall up. But, seeing it from the publisher's side, it does drive me crazy that, here in Reno, there is a multi-million-dollar arts organization that is always sending me requests for coverage and everything. And yet when I send them the request for, hey, can you, do you want to advertise this big thing coming up? And they say, I'm sorry, it just isn't in the budget, yet our story's in there, and, the 1,500-word story previewing this big thing that's going to be going on for 2 months is in the paper, and they're getting their, earned media. And yet, at the end of the month, we're not paying people as much as they should.
Jimmy, what is the model for independence moving forward? I know that there's a, here in Napa Valley, there's a highway 29 Media, which is the highway that runs through here. And they just started, and they bought, there's 5 towns in Napa Valley: Marion Canyon, Napa, Yountville, St. Helena, and Calistoga. Only Napa has a paper, and It's the Lee Enterprise paper. 29 is going to try to cover the rest of those on a smaller scale. And they did a for-profit, nonprofit. I forget the name of that sort of entity, that business entity. But it's a way that they can actually, because of the importance of local news, they can actually raise funds as well as make money on that side. And that's like an interesting business model to me. It's going to require continued investment unless they sell a bunch of ads along the way. And I'm not sure that will do it.
You're seeing a variety of models coming up. In some markets with some publications, they're still doing very well. They've got a nice, healthy future. I'm actually in the process right now here in Reno. I'm working with a consultant, and I don't know for sure that we're going down this route, but I'd say that it's very likely that we're actually going to be going down the route of trying to convert the Reno News and Review into a complete nonprofit. It won't even be the for-profit nonprofit side. It might be. But what I'm thinking is we're probably going to end up converting it into a full nonprofit news source, simply because first of all, the News Review has a lot of things going for it, even though it went away for 2 years. First of all, there is no debt. This paper has no debt. I got the assets from the former owners, and put some of my own money into it, but I'm not looking to get paid. I stepped in to revive this newspaper because this is my hometown. It's where I had my first byline in 1996 as a summer intern outside of my college newspaper, and it means a lot to the community. And so the amount of money we're talking about to keep, it's breaking even right now without paying me, granted, but it's breaking even without paying me. So if we can keep with, and there's different rules with advertising for nonprofits, you have to be careful. But if we can keep the News and Review bringing in the revenue that it is right now, raise enough money from nonprofits, be it grants or individual donors or national funders, you name it, to pay for a publisher, then all of a sudden the News and Review can exist without me and actually have a full-time publisher that isn't splitting his time between Reno and Palm Springs. And then they can take that and build on that and try to get more advertising, try to get more grants. And I think that that's probably the future that a lot of smaller publications like the Reno News Review are going to have, because be it a hybrid model with for-profit and nonprofit, or be it a complete nonprofit model, having that nonprofit side does open you up to a lot more funding in terms of foundations and grants and individual donors that may want that tax break. And so I think you're going to be seeing a lot of publications going that route.
This has been enlightening. I'm glad we've had this chance to talk to you. What I'd like to do, Jimmy, I'd like to ask you, what's the best way for our viewers to connect with you, read your publications, sign up for your newsletters? Where should we send them?
For Reno, go to renonr.com. For the Coachella Valley Independent, go to cvindependent.com. There's big fields on there where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter here in Reno, or the Indie Digest in the Coachella Valley. And of course, if you go to our About page, my contact information, my phone number, my email address, you name it, it's there. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of.
That's great. Jimmy, thank you so much. We've so enjoyed talking to you today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and Jimmy, you got to keep coming up with these headlines and punching stodgy PR in the face, dude. That's
keep taking pot shots at us. We love it.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
Thanks
for being here.